Hello there. Hi. Happy Thursday. Oh, man alive. I just put the light on. It's so dark. Right. Boom. Boom. Technology. Pen. Ooh. Ooh. Kate. Ooh. Right. Here we go. Here we go. We are on. We are on, literally. We are, well, no, not. Now we are. We are live. We are live. And by we, I mean the raw we. That'll be me. Evening. Oh. Ooh, that's curtain. That's not what I want. Hang on. The light system is failing. There we go. All right, Kate, is it your request? This one is at your request. Mindless versus mindful eating. Dun, dun, dun. Dramatic music. Do you like that? Hey, Daksha. Yeah. Mindless versus mindful eating. Ooh, I love this one. I see more people, but I do not see who they are. Who are these people? I've got Daksha. I've got Kate. I've got two of the mystery people. I love it when there's mysteries. We just don't know who they are. Hello. Da, 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 da. Well, it's Friday already tomorrow. Where has the time? Where has this year gone? Oh God. Where has this? I was gonna say, where's the week gone? Where's the year gone? Anyone know? Someone yesterday legitimately was like, "What year are we again?" Hey, Pooja. Why is it Pooja you don't even show until you say something, and then it's like, "Oh, there she is." Can't even say. She's like, "What year are we?" Because even when she went, "What day of the week or month?" She's like, "What year are we again?" You know when you really want to mess with someone, you go, "Oh yeah, it's 2019." Just to see if you can convince somebody. I bet you could. I think we all try it now. I bet someone will try it over this week. I can bring that down a little bit. Pretend that we're actually in the wrong year and see if anybody buys it. I bet they do. I bet you can get somebody convinced. Right, T minus. Now! Right, mindless versus mindful eating at the request of Kate. Now, I would use it slightly in relation to what day was it? I don't know what day of the week it was. Oh, Tuesday's live. Just think about that. Look, I'm doing the same. What year are we? Tuesday's live, which was about pain and moving forwards. And I used a lot of the change cycle in relation to this. And actually, mindless eating versus mindful eating is actually part of that system as well. And I'll explain, obviously, why it is. Go through what happens in terms of why we eat mindlessly to start with, what the transitions are, why we do it or why we transition, and then understand where you may be in terms of your own eating and how you can make that happen for yourself. So as in, if you're mindless eating now, how can you turn it into mindful eating and then take control of it to some degree and then can be completely conscious? Because the name of the game is to become more aware, as we know, because becoming aware means you can take action. Win. Right. So what is mindless eating? It's that point, generally speaking, where it's before someone becomes a UFIT member, for sure. It's in the stage, so it's in, thinking about the change cycle, it's in pre-contemplation. And that's the point where somebody is completely oblivious that they're gaining weight to some degree, or if they are aware, they're not ready to deal with it or do anything about stopping it. What they want to do is stay in what they perceive to be a pleasurable behaviour in terms of food or alcohol, and continue to eat without interruption and without having to look at the reasons why. And I said a phrase in that's very important, which I will come back to, which is perceived pleasure. So someone will be eating out of the perceived pleasure they have from food and will not be willing to look at that at too much detail at that point, because they haven't even started to weigh up if there's any benefit in them making any changes to their behaviours. So they're in pre-contemplation. So that stage when I talked about on Tuesday and previously, where somebody just isn't completely aware that there is a need somewhere in the background, or they've not focused in on the pain it's causing themselves from either a physical or emotional level, their behaviours. They've not seen yet that it's causing any damage. So when I talked about pain, right, I talked about exactly that. So in pre-contemplation, they're just not in enough pain yet. So as in they've not gained enough weight from their behaviour, so the unconscious eating, or not gained enough weight. That's the truth. That's through what happens when we're talking about mindless eating. There hasn't been a consequence that's painful enough for that individual to want to become more aware of it, or want to actually look at what is the root cause of why they're choosing to do that. So basically, at that point, the pros of staying the same outweigh it. They're so outweighs it that they're not even willing to look at the either or. They're not willing to look at the pros of changing. It's like the pros of staying the same right now are just too pleasurable. So what happens is the conscious mind switches off and moves towards what is perceived pleasure. Now, if any of you are members or non-members, maybe the members will know this more when they're going through the process, is the perceived pleasure is really important, because whenever we talk to clients, or I talk to clients as coaches, we're saying things like, okay, so when did it stop being pleasurable? Because they'll be like, oh my God, I went out, it was my favourite chocolate. Oh my God, I've got my favourite chocolate bar. I love this chocolate. Oh my God, I ate the whole thing. I was like, okay, cool. Well, let's talk about it. Like, when did it stop being pleasurable? And they're like, well, okay, if you challenged me, it was probably maybe a couple of squares in, maybe a little bit more. And actually towards the end, I'm quite feeling a little bit sick, right? Well, how do you feel after that? Well, and I felt guilty. Actually, the perceived pleasure of the moment will keep that person in that behaviour until they have a situation like with a coach like us to try to bring it into focus a little bit more. Basically, the idea of pleasure in mindless eating is far more pleasurable than reality, right? So repeat that. The idea of pleasure from a food, the perceived pleasure of getting from that food, is greater than the reality. Because the reality is, at the end, they'll turn around and say, I didn't even know I did it. How many times have many of you might have said it, or might have got to the end of something and gone, oh God, how did we get to the end of that? Because you know somewhere there's been a switch off, that the perceived pleasure of what you're doing, that habit in the moment, has more value. There's just no check-ins. The pleasure stops. There's no sense of fullness either, because there's some complete switch off of fullness, because the perceived pleasure you're having from that food right now is greater, right, than the reality. The reality is feeling sick and bloated and all the rest of it, and actually in that moment you're not wanting to focus in on it. So then, if we're in that state, because by the way, we want to stay away from, I've talked about pain and pleasure, we want to move towards pleasure as much as possible. Usually that's why we really do it to some degree. Mindless eating is moving towards pleasure as much as possible, or perceived pleasure. That's why we do it, because we don't like pain as individuals, right? We don't like having to say no to ourselves, or acknowledge that there's a consequence to our behaviours, because that's pain. Actually want to stay in pleasure. So we want to stay feeling good, perceiving this food is going to make us feel good. Just makes me think of something actually. I went to, stick with me on this, I went to an online Buddhism course in the middle of lockdown. I looked at it the other day on my notes, in May. It was mid-May. And the guy teaching it said, pleasure in food is really interesting. Because he said, I've always thought that Eccles cakes were amazing. He said, I always used to go to Starbucks before lockdown and have coffee and an Eccles cakes. He said, I thought, well, if it makes me feel so good, what I'm going to do is I'm going to bulk buy these at home and eat as many as possible, because I want to feel good in the middle of lockdown. So that's what he did. He sat and ate 5 packs of Eccles cakes. And he said, at some point, I thought to myself, this doesn't work, because if I love this so much, why do I not feel more love the more I eat? If I'm really happy eating something, why is it I don't feel happier the more I eat of it? And actually, to some degree, I'd argue he was becoming conscious of his behaviours when it came to his association with Eccles cakes. And yet we all do it with something in our diet. We do it with something where we're like, actually, at some point, I'm recognising this has become mindless. So it might have started as mindful, like his did, and become mindless. He's right though. If you're not getting more pleasure the more you eat of it, is it really pleasurable? Or is that something you're telling yourself to allow your behaviour because you want to stay comforting yourself somewhere, or stay in comfort by eating the food that you know in reality isn't going to do that, right? So how then, if you're in this position, if you want to go from mindless to mindful eating, and ultimately, let's be honest, it's about losing weight. So if you're going from one to other, you need to be stepping into from, if you talk about a change cycle, from pre-contemplation to contemplation. So it's really asking yourself the questions, right, to some degree that I kind of just touched on, which is actually, if I eat more of this food, will I be more happy? Will I actually, if I continue, if I actually wait for a second, pause, and actually look at this and say, oh, is this as much pleasure as I think? Are the consequences as great as I think? If I put myself into pain in this moment and imagine the worst case scenario, is that worth it? Is that pain and the result of this behaviour better or worse? Because what actually somebody's doing is going into contemplation now. So they're going into weighing up. Is there a pro and con of staying the same, or is there a pro and con of changing? So is there a pro, because sometimes there is, of not changing. If I do this exercise with a client, it's fascinating. If I want to make them more mindful about their choices, some people will have pros of not changing their habit. Sometimes I have pros of binge eating, because they'll say, actually, do you know what, it helps me deal with stress at work. I don't have to think about prepping food, I can just eat what I want out of the cupboard. There are actual pros for somebody staying the same in their behaviour. Now, if you ask them the pros of changing, really, I think 10 times out of 10, actually, if I think about it, they always outweigh the pros of staying the same, because they have to, because someone's in that point where they're asking for help and support. So ultimately, it's always going to outweigh it. The thing is, until you get a client, or even with yourselves, write down what they are, that's when they're not conscious. They're just somewhere in the background, like floating around, like you know they're there, but you're not really focusing on them. So you're thinking about, is the pros and cons physical, mental, emotional? What is this behaviour supporting when you're mindlessly eating? And then what we're doing is we're making it mindful. We're making it a conscious choice, because it's going from something that is perceived pleasure into a conscious choice that has facts, that has tangibility, that has a written association. So that is a really interesting and fascinating exercise to take the first steps into, from pre-contemplation, which is mindless, into contemplation, where you are becoming mindful. Because we know, again, if I recap the change cycle, then we're going to go into planning. So you've made a decision like that. If the pros of changing outweigh, we're going to go into planning. Now, planning stage with a client who wants to become more mindful of food can be anything, right? You guys will know some of this, like the slow eating. Slow eating is actually planning to say, right, how many days am I actually going to choose to slow eat? Actually slow down, even being mindless with my food. Say, right, I'm choosing consciously to be mindless with this binge, but actually though, I'm going to do it very, very slowly and savour every moment and see what difference that makes, because it does, because it's still becoming mindful. 20 minutes, all that stuff, being aware, conscious of your food. Like, mindfulness is food, isn't just what you're eating, it's how you're eating, right? Are you fully engaged with your meal or with what you're eating? Are you always watching the TV? Are you always on your phone? Are you always chatting? Are you always got cutlery in your hands? Or are you putting it down in between? Are you rushing, not engaging? Are you hare or tortoise when you eat, right? All this stuff changes from mindless eating and mindful, because that's what happens. If a client goes out to dinner and they say to me, there's, I can hear, I know it, there's anxiety strong, there's a fear of the uncertainty if they're going to be able to go out and not have, like, go crazy. They'll be like, I don't know, what am I going to do? What do I choose? Here's the menu, what do I choose? And I'm like, well, what do you want to have? Oh, well, I want this, is that okay? I'm like, have what you want, eat it slowly. You can do like this, what? I'm like, I want the fish and chips. I'm like, okay, have the fish and chips, eat it slowly, engage in it. Be mindful of the food you're eating, as in engage in it, be conscious of it, enjoy the texture, chew it, really engage in it. Because if it's something you really want, you're going to wait and take your time on it and become mindful of the choices you're making while you eat. Become conscious of your body, become less mindless of how your gut's telling you it's full. All these things combine to make it from mindless to mindful. So you're engaging in food, you're present, you're recognizing your fullness, and then ultimately you are mindful. Well, all that stuff is then action, right? So you plan it and then you action it. You actually action it. Change cycle. And as I said the other day, with pain and comfort and pleasure, there is, of course, a relapse. There is always a relapse with mindless eating. It does not matter where you are on your journey at any point, there is always a mindless moment. And that's okay, because, like I always talk about the change cycle and about anything else we learn, it is a learning curve. So the idea is that you go, right, okay, so if I'm thinking about the change cycle, I've listened to what Helen said, I've gone mindless eating now. We go one way and the other. We know that. We punish ourselves and go, oh my God, why did you do it? You're so stupid. That why? You shouldn't have done that. Or you say, okay, so now I know. I've now got to weigh up the pros and cons of getting back to what I was doing before and decide I'm going to go through the cycle again. Or I can sit and comfort myself and beat myself up about something that I can't change, right? Or I can change my response and go into the change cycle, understand this is what's natural, it's meant to happen, it is okay, it does happen to everyone. I don't care who you are. Everyone will do it. It might not be food, it might be alcohol, it might be whatever it is. There is always a mindless approach to food at some point in someone's journey, whoever they are, whatever they say or don't say. It is a natural part of human behaviour. And I think, unfortunately, there's a lot of shame or imperfection around being mindless at times when it's a perception again, not the reality, that everybody else is mindful of their food and everybody else is losing weight and everybody else is doing marvellously, and there's me eating chocolate. I am such a bad person. No, you know, it doesn't vanish. Mindless eating doesn't vanish because 80% of the time you're on point. There is always some point where mindless eating comes in for whatever reason, right? Temporary or otherwise. It is part of the change cycle to relapse and become mindless. Again, the trick is to how quickly you become mindful again. In my experience, clients who work with us longer will always nip it in the bud faster. So every time they go into it, because they will always go through change cycles, so always at some point become mindless. The next time it happens, they deal with it in a different way. No, to say different, they deal with it in a different way, and they're able to action some of these skills, use the tools that they know, and then change how they react, right? So there you go, Kate. There was mindless versus mindful eating. Then, come on, keep them coming, Kate. Keep them coming. I can do them for you all the time. Recap. So I went through what mindless eating is, why we do it. I love it when Kate does this. Why we do it, the pros and cons are always there. We're not really weighing them up yet, because in mindless eating, we're perceiving the pleasure, right? Perceived pleasure. Please remember that as one of my sayings. Eat the rainbow, yes. Perceived pleasure, because it's in the name, it's perceived, it's not real. The reality is we feel terrible, we're guilty. The reality is that there's not as much pleasure as we actually thought there really is. And the consequences always make us feel terrible as well. Again, it's the question that I can't say enough. This is somebody one of my sayings. Doing the homework, doing the work, as Sam would say, do the work, is writing down the pros and cons and staying the same. It's making it a little bit more painful for you. Yes, sometimes it is a painful exercise, because like, oh, this is uncomfortable. Guess what though? With getting into that pain becomes change, comes action, right? So planning how to do it, then getting it done. So engaging in your food, people, is a brilliant thing to be able to eat, right? Blessed we are to become present in it, right? Have what you want when you go out to eat. Just engage in the moment, eat it, savor it, right? God knows that we spent a lot of time cooking for ourselves at home, and now it's like, go out, actually enjoy it, actually be present, turn off the phone, actually chew the food, enjoy it, savor it, listen to your body, know when it's had enough, and know that like I said, relapse is all part of it. You are meant to relapse. That is a natural and normal response. It's part of the change cycle. The thing is that will make it different from person to person is how you react to the relapse of going into some mindless eating. It's how you flip it back into mindful and then stay on track, tortoise style, long term. Tomorrow, join me for ooh, this one's so on point. Change of environment, people, it's a coming. I feel like we've done this one before. We have, however, a request of another client, we have change of environment coming up tomorrow at 5. Please join me. Until then, enjoy your evenings, and I'll see you later.